Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. Remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because when you do, you get 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm your host, Drew Creasman. I'm the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. With me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons, and joining us for this one from MLB Network Radio, at Hunter Reiser. Probably not the at on your full name. I don't think it's probably on the birth certificate there, but thanks for joining us, man. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Hunter, I've long been a fan of your work over there at Power Alley on MLB Network Radio with Mike Farron, and last week was kind of the pinnacle of it all because Arenado got traded, and they were riding you pretty hard, weren't they?
It was a tough week. I mean, it was it's bad enough when one of the players from your favorite team gets traded, but then made worse when the deal is as bad as that one was. So yeah, they say it like it is. So I mean, I was good for it. As I said, I have decided that the Nuggets and Avalanche will be getting some business, as not so much the Rockies.
And you've got an interesting perspective too on that show on Power Alley. Again, Mike Farron, who has been with the Diamondbacks for a while, and Jim Duquette, a former general manager. They're hitting you from both sides. They got the NOS perspective, they got the general manager's perspective. What were your thoughts on that deal for a guy who works in national radio, but still has his heart in Colorado? What were your thoughts on that, on the Arenado trade when it went down?
Yeah, I mean, when it first happened, I think all of us were shocked. I was of the opinion that the Rockies would not trade him. I didn't think that they'd be able to get enough for him. I also feel like better deals get made for bats at the trade deadline. So I was of the opinion that if things got worse, that they would trade Nolan sometime between now and the trade deadline. But when it happened, I mean, it was shocking, and you look for the return, obviously. And I think I had more of a perspective of I didn't feel like the Rockies were going to get a package of 3 of the top 10 guys from the Cardinals. That's just not what happens. I mean, if you look at the deals that were made this winter, Francisco Lindor trade, Blake Snell trade, both of those guys are elite players. I mean, Francisco Lindor could argue is close to, if not the same caliber as Nolan at shortstop as Nolan is at third. And when you see those deals and what the return is, as a fan, you're likely to feel underwhelmed. And looking back at other deals that the Cardinals have made, I mean, you just have to go back to the Goldschmidt deal 3 years ago, I guess, at this point, to see what the Cardinals gave up to get, one of, at that time, he was easily top 5 first baseman, maybe even top 3. And Zach Gallen was the, in that deal, the big piece of that deal with Carson Kelly and some guys like that. So, I mean, knowing that as the backdrop, you had to figure that it was not going to be Matthew Liberatore, Nolan Gorman, guys like that. You weren't going to get 5 of those guys or something, but you were hoping for more. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that you were hoping for more than what the Rockies got. And that was the biggest disappointment. And then see that they paid basically to get rid of their best player, a Hall of Fame player. I mean, it just compounded everything. And then, I mean, as it slowly progresses, you have a press conference, and, I think you guys probably have talked about the Rockies aren't a team that's going to contend. And if you look at any sort of projection, the Fangraphs projections came out today, the Rockies have a 0.2% chance of making the playoffs. That's not 2% even.
So you're saying there's a chance. You're saying there's a chance.
That's right. The Orioles did have 0, I saw.
Yeah. The Orioles had straight up 0. Yeah, so they run 10,000 simulations. The Orioles never got in the playoffs. The Rockies clearly got in a few of them. So, that's where it is. So to say that this is a team that's contending doesn't feel, like you're shooting your fans straight, I guess, a little bit. And when you compare the rosters, even in the division, they don't match up. I think anybody can see that when you look at it, and that's sad because this is one of the better Rockies pitching staffs that they've ever had, I would say. I mean, I think that it's up there with the 04 World Series staff as far as what they can throw out there. And Germán Marquez is a really, really good pitcher. Kyle Freeland had a good year, so the hope was that you would have been able to build on that, which is what Nolan signed up for. So that's where the disappointment came from. So now we move forward. I guess the other part too that I would say is that when that trade happens, you immediately are thinking, what's the next step? Or how far are we now from being able to contend? And they didn't even get any prospects in the deal that you think are probably going to be major contributors. You look at Mookie Betts, and while the Red Sox basically got one player in that deal, he's an everyday player for that team now. And the Rockies in this deal for as good of a player, I mean, I'm interested to see what Gomber does, but they didn't get anybody of Alex Verdugo's quality. And then also I would just say, like, to see some of the deals that have gone down over the last couple of days. Alex Cobb was traded, and the Orioles, paid some of that money too. The Orioles got a better prospect by most evaluations than any of the prospects the Rockies got. So I mean, that's disappointing. That's where we are. So
yeah, we've got to give these guys some room to breathe. You're right, but when you look at top 100 lists, they've been a little disappointing, as you said, when you make all those comparisons to other great players that have been traded this offseason, last offseason. To go back a step, you did reference some of those great pitching staffs in 2007 and whatnot. Just to take some people back, again, you work for MLB Network Radio. You're on the East Coast now, but take us back to where it all started. You are from Colorado.
Yeah, I was born and raised south of Denver. I went to Cherry Creek High School.
We won't hold that against you too much.
It's fine.
Too much.
It's okay.
I mean, Brad Lidge and I work together still. We're pretty much the same. So,
right.
But yeah, I born and raised in Denver. I actually worked at the Fan for 8 years. Worked at what was 102.3 The Ticket. It didn't last for 2 years is all. But yeah, I spent many years working in Denver radio. If you ever heard me, I mostly went under the name of Patch Adams back in the day. Dr. Hunter Patch Adams is christened by Dan Jacobs. So yeah, I have plenty of years in the clubhouse at Coors Field and locker rooms at Pepsi and all those ball game, I guess. So.
And you got a little throwback shirt there. What is that Dinger tee you've got on? That's something you busted out of the closet, especially for us, right? And we appreciate that. What is that?
I think among Rockies fans, I'm in the minority of fans of Dinger, but I was at Dinger's birth at Old Mile High, so I love Dinger. My Twitter avatar is Dinger. My LinkedIn picture is me and Dinger. I'm a Dinger guy.
I'm big on Dinger, and so is Ryan Spilborghs. So at least that makes 3 hardcore Dinger fans.
I was going to say there are 3 fans of Dinger. Fantastic.
At least over the age of 15. We'll say it like that.
Right.
If you're under 15.
Well, he's terrifying to children, so I mean, I don't think there's any under anyway. So
he very much is. So, Hunter, since you were kind of walking up to it, and we got the question here from Liam, what do you think and/or hope happens with Trevor Story at this point? Because it does seem like now there's this kind of 2-directional path for most Rockies fans. Blow it all up, burn it all down, trade Trevor Story, John Gray, Germán Marquez, get what you can, build toward the Zach Veen era, I guess we would say. Or the other era that goes, I don't want to be bad for the next 3 or 4 years. Maybe if they can extend Story, maybe even if they can't extend Story, you can build around this next group. You mentioned the pitching staff. Keep those guys together. Don't. So where are you at with all of that? Or particularly starting with Trevor Story, though?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's probably the toughest question. I think I've started to come around to the side of trading Trevor. I think I would probably argue that I think the Rockies are the furthest team from contending in Major League Baseball. I would put them behind the Pirates as far as, building towards the future, and even like looking at Keith Law put out his farm system ratings this week. He has the Pirates, I think, at 16 or 17 and the Rockies at 21. So, I mean, yes, the Rockies are better than the Pirates this year, but in the future, you can make the argument the Pirates are going to be better or have a better farm system to build from. So I think that probably at this point, building the farm system is probably something that needs to get done. I don't believe that Trevor will sign. I think that that's kind of a crazy idea. Number one, he's going to be likely the top or, the second best free agent available next winter. So, I mean, he's going to get a lot of money, and for him, it's worth it to take it to that. So do you think the Rockies will be able to contend in that high end of the market, when that happens? I don't think so. So they're likely to lose him. So the other part that's hard about saying, trade Trevor is look at what they've got, just for Nolan Arenado. So, what gives you confidence that they're going to be able to get what would be a overwhelming return for Trevor? Like I said, if it was me, I think you get more at the trade deadline. So maybe ride it out until then as well and see, most guys don't like to negotiate during the season, but there's a possibility that he does and he signs. But I think the other thing about that is if he signs, we're basically in a Nolan spot again where they feel like the payroll is too high quickly because you're going to be paying Blackman $31 million next year. You have John Gray as a free agent as well. So, at some point it's about the dollars that they feel willing to spend. And I think that they probably are not going to choose to go over the number that they're at about right now, which, only leaves you so much flexibility going forward if you sign Trevor for, the number is over $30 million for him. So,
yeah, there's a bit of a, damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario where, again, you can see a way that, dealing Trevor Story and, seeing what you can get for him, whether it's now or at the trade deadline, how that could play out really well and help, jumpstart really the rebuilding process. But at the same time, you go, do you trust this front office to be the ones to get the most for it? And yeah, obviously it's not very sexy to just let them, go to free agency and assuming that in the next CBA, there's still a qualifying offer. If there is, all right, you get a 32nd overall pick. And hey, that's great, but you'd like your odds. You would think you'd like your odds at turning that instead of going with the 32nd overall pick, you can turn that over for something a little bit sooner than that. But maybe that's what the Rockies want to do. Maybe if the Rockies realize that their window of potential relevance again isn't going to be until 3-4 years down the line. If so, then you know what? Ride it out with Trevor Story. Enjoy it. If someone knocks your socks off at the trade deadline, take it. If not, let them go to a free agency and you get whatever compensation you can get for him, because you know what? Bottom line is you don't need any AA or AAA prospects right now, because you're just going to waste those guys' service time going forward. It's this whole idea of, you got Ryan McMahon and Sam Hilliard and, Garrett Hampson, a few other guys that you say, hey, maybe these guys will, be something. But by the time that they figure it out, they could be approaching free agency by the time there's a certain amount of relevance. So it's a real catch-22 that the Rockies find themselves in that really is unlike any other organization besides Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh seems to be in this rut perpetually. They can't figure it out, whereas some other teams, like even the Orioles, there's some hope there that maybe, not this year, as you said, they're at 0.0% of making the postseason, but there's some hope with, Adley Rutschman and DL Hall, Grayson Rodriguez, a lot of these young prospects for the Orioles. And because you're in that DC area. So I think there's some positivity right now in Baltimore, wouldn't you say, for maybe the next couple of years where they might be able to figure some things out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even the Pirates, being under the leadership of Ben Cherington, I mean, that I have liked the moves that he's made. To me, they've made sense. So, I mean, starting with that, and then the Orioles as well. I mean, they have Mike Elias in the front office there, who, is a guy that has people excited out here. And like you said, Rutschman was the number 1 overall pick. There's no, arguing the potential there. So, I mean, for the Rockies, they have to start to figure out and look towards, like, when's their next window? When's their window of contention coming up? And, you have the Dodgers out there and now the Padres this winter. I mean, that window got further away. I mean, the Padres this year aren't even going to have Mike Clevenger, so like they have built this window with Fernando Tatis there that's going to be open for a long time. And the Dodgers have the pipeline of all pipelines where, they just keep finding guys. And that's something where the Rockies, I think, need to start to do a better job if they're going to be contending with those teams. The Dodgers have an unlimited budget. The Dodgers have 8 pitchers right now who make more than the top pitcher for the Rockies. They all make more than $8 million. Those 8 guys is more than the Rockies' payroll combined. So, like, that's what you're up against. And so you have to build a monster that is a farm system that can generate those guys. And the Padres have done it. I mean, the Padres traded guys and still are one of the top, systems in baseball. So those are the things you have to start to do for the Rockies. Like, that's the mountain. That's the mountain that you're climbing. So,
well, I made it back. I had some tricky internet situation there for a while, and I'll tell you what, though this may seem like an odd transition, I promise you it's a good one, because first of all, you definitely want to make sure your internet is nice and secure, but then you got to check out our friends at Zoom Care. Some of this talk about the Rockies might be making you feel a little and the video care folks using some Zoom so that you can get a little bit of a doctor's visit, check on yourself, but without actually having to go in. You can see, hear, chat with your doctor just like in a traditional office visit. You get secure access to urgent, primary, and specialist care, including mental health. Video care is covered by most private insurers, usually with a copay. So visit zoomcare.com to get started. That's ZOOMCARE.com. Nothing better than getting a diagnosis from your doc while sitting in your own living room. And remember that supporting our partners is supporting us. So help them out. If they see an increase in videos from Colorado, it really, really helps them out, and they will see that. So just going to Zoom Care, giving it a check. If you've been wondering, you need to get something checked out, you don't want to go into the doctor, go to zoomcare.com. You'll get all the details that you need there. And just make sure that your internet is a little bit better than mine has been today, because that would be frustrating for everybody involved.
Yeah, the Zoom is more about it being virtual rather than the speed with which these meetings are, because they take their time with you and make sure you get all your questions answered.
And then once you are all set, once you're nice and good, once you're healthy and you know that you got that blood pressure and everything's good to go, time to hop on the DraftKings Sportsbook app and just start playing with some money, like having a little bit of fun out there, man. It's sad to see the NFL season, I should say, in the books. Can't be betting on that anymore. Going to turn to UFC a little bit. March Madness right around the corner before we really start getting into the baseball stuff. But UFC, 258 coming up. And if you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today, they will hook you up with a $1 into $100 if you get the chosen title contender to win this weekend on Saturday night. So place your bet, watch the fist fly this weekend, and use code DNVR to turn $1 into $100 for the main event Saturday night for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700.
Kumara Usman, that's the guy to go with this Saturday for UFC 258. Well, we got our guy, Hunter, here. We got spring training coming up next week. Do we? I am still doubtful. Is that crazy to think that this day that we all dream of every winter, and it's here? Everything's scheduled. I mean, I think if you were to probably drive down to Coors Field right now, you'd see those large trucks. They're loading them up with gear. I think maybe. Is it still crazy to have doubt that this is actually going to go down as planned?
Well, I mean, I think the season is going to go. I think that they made changes here in the last couple of weeks to the schedule for both Florida and Arizona teams, but I mean, we're full speed ahead. I don't think there's any stopping that train. I think that, and luckily for all of us, that season is just around the corner. And yeah, I think that spring training is going to be different. There are already some sites that are selling tickets. That the letter from the Cactus League came out a couple of weeks ago, but I think that they're going to be having some degree of attendance. I know people who have bought tickets actually in Arizona already. So, I mean, spring training will be here. The pitchers and catchers report on the 17th or 13th, I think, is the first day. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But it's 17th? Just around the corner. And then, And then, the season, I don't think that there's any delay in the season. I mean, it's hard to make an argument when they had a season last year and now you have sports going on in the NBA and the NHL, which have fans, which are inside. So, it makes it a tough argument to say that, the sport of baseball can't be played outside, which, is a safer way anyway. Even in Arizona where, there are teams playing in Glendale, which is where, the Cactus League is. So that to me it's a tough argument to say that we're not going to start or we're not going to play. So.
Yeah, Scottsdale, I think, where the Giants play, I think they announced about 750 to 1,000, and again, right down the street from Salt River Fields, where the Rockies and Diamondbacks train. So you like the odds of that happening. And yeah, oh man, I hope you're right, and I think you will be. But I don't know. I can't fully commit. I mean, maybe it'll start up normal, and then something will happen. Drew, am I crazy? Do you still feel a little
I think maybe we're
believe
just
when you see it.
Yeah, that's I think part of it. It's just we've been through so much. Like ostensibly, our job is to discuss, cover, and analyze baseball games, and that's something we have done exactly 60 times in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's just like that just doesn't. So I think there's a part of us that's just waiting for the other shoe to drop with this thing, and I hope Hunter's right here, and in a way, and then that nothing bad comes of it. There's, you mentioned that they're indoors, but one of the places that they aren't necessarily is directly in these hot spots in Florida and Arizona also. So I worry about that a little bit. But if and baseball teams are also big, gigantic organisms, right? Like a basketball team and an NBA team is 12 dudes, like you can fit in a limo, right? Like 105 guys a team are showing up for spring training, and so. But I hope it goes well, because we need baseball and we need a full season of baseball. We really do, after that 60 game sample and everyone trying to make the best of it. But I wonder how many things that we believe were real from the 60-game season that we're about to find out, like, nope, that was just a thing that happened that one weird year, It's going to be a fascinating season right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of them was Nolan's performance last year.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, they're limiting the number of guys the teams can have in camp this year to 75. The NFL had games in Glendale, Arizona. They actually even moved another team there. So, I mean, those are bigger organizations even. So, to me, it's going to happen. I actually think the bigger issue is going from 60 games to 162. I mean,
Yes.
I can understand why the players don't want to do fewer games, but the risk of injuries to me, is extremely high, and it
Very
means
high.
that, it's something that a lot of other teams have done that I would say the Rockies haven't done, which is building depth. And, that's an important thing where you're probably going to need even more starting pitching than you ever have. I mean, just the risk of injury, the amount of guys are going to be able to go. To me, it is putting even more of an emphasis on stuff like that. So that's somewhere that I think the Rockies have, obviously they've done nothing because they have done nothing this winter. And I think it's going to be another area where they're going to have some trouble. To be reliant on guys like Gigi Gonzalez and Derek Rodriguez and Ryan Castellini to be the fill-in guys. We've seen a lot of those things before. And so,
Did you not hear that they signed Greg Byrd today? Did you not hear the blockbuster?
I mean, first
news?
base.
That is a
signing.
signing.
A place that.
Yeah, that is a signing I've actually been waiting for about 2 years now.
I
guess it's never happening. And so that'll be really interesting too, because he could pair very nicely with Fuentes over there as the left-handed, component. There is that shot. But Hunter, yeah, you kind of tease this idea that a lot of teams are going with 6-man rotations, and Padres got 6. Dodgers, I don't think they're going to go with an 8-man rotation, but if they change their mind, they have the opportunity to do it. Do you think there'll be as many injuries on the position player side as well? Because we kind of expect it here with the jump up in innings from, less than 100 to, 200 plus if you're in a 5-man rotation. So you go 6-man rotation. But could we see injuries on the position player side as well, more than we're, normally used to seeing because of the longer season?
I mean, I think it's hard to predict, injuries to position players. It's during an 162 game season, regardless, it's long for just about every guy. And by the end, I mean, it's a war of attrition. I mean, you've seen that when the Rockies get to the playoffs or any other team that, you're very much tested, just like in every other sport. Like when you get to the end, it's everybody who can stand, basically. So I don't necessarily think that it's going to be more injuries for the batters, for the position players every day. I mean, I would say that they're going to want. I would think that they'll be more tired than they were. Now, most of them are conditioned to have played in a 162 game season before, but you just played only 60. And then you were shut down.
Right.
So, I mean, going to the 162 is just going to feel like a lot. There's no way it can't. You're adding 100 games. So, in that sense, maybe there'll be more injuries and maybe they'll be, towards the end of the season as guys start to break down. But, I mean, these guys are, a million times better athletes than I am. And they're training.
I'm glad you didn't throw me in on that
one. I wasn't going to assume with you guys. I don't know if you're doing Ironmans out there, but
I was going to say this guy a little bit.
All right. Well, so I mean, there is a likelihood that by the end, that's going to start to pile up. But I just would say, injuries are fluke a lot of time too, and you hit a bag wrong, or you're trying to get home on a pop fly or something like that. Like, who knows how they happen? I don't think that you can just say there will be more injuries. I would say that you could assume that there might be more and that you would want to have depth to try to prevent it and give guys more days off. But I don't know that I would say that it's a guarantee.
That could be a spot where the Rockies might be at a disadvantage is, again, just being younger. I mean, we see with minor league ball players too all the time where the second half, they take a step back from the progress that they made for the first 3 months of the season. And it just happens. They're not used to it as well. And with, the lack of, certain veteran leadership on the Rockies, there are those guys, but, they're certainly outnumbered by what my partner Drew here has kind of called them the lost boys, because the Rockies have a ton of guys that, they're not prospects, but they are players that we don't know what to expect of them yet, which is not a good thing. You kind of want to have maybe a little bit more hopes, and you want to have possibly seen a lot more from those guys, but they're going to get an opportunity, which is really nice. But those young guys, those lost boys outnumber the veterans, and that could be, a disadvantage that the Rockies have over, some other teams. Again, we know that they're not necessarily going to contend, but if they're in it, even remotely, depending on how many playoff spots we get this year, man, come August 1st or whenever that trade deadline might be, that's really going to be hard for these guys who've already been grinding away at 100 games, 40 more than last year, and expecting to do it for 2 more months, when the September, the roster expansion that we've typically been used to this year with the health and safety protocols, much like last year, is only going to go up to 28. So they're only going to have about 2 more guys being added to the roster. So you're not going to get maybe, the last couple of innings off, if you're Trevor Story, hey, you know what, take a breather. You don't need that final at bat in this game. It's a blowout either way. Rockies are going to, unfortunately be at a disadvantage in that way.
I would say probably. The only thing that I might counter with is that while they haven't played as many games, that might also be to some degree a good thing because they have youth on their side. So I mean,
sure.
As a 30-plus-year-old, I can tell you that, you have it's harder to recover and everything like that. So, I mean, that is something that is, that will be a helpful thing. Yeah. They are a younger team. So, yes, they will have played fewer games, and they definitely, will come in having less games under the belt. But in the end, you could say that that's positive. And they don't have the wear and tear on their legs and their bodies as much as, like a guy like, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a veteran out there who's had some injuries like Albert Pujols or somebody like that, going from 62 games to 162 games for a guy like that who's battled stuff is probably going to be really tough.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would think. We'll worry about that problem if and when the young guys are playing enough that they actually have kept them in it, I would say. But I could see that going either direction. Either their bodies break down because they're not used to playing the number of games, or like Hunter said, they're so young and they're ready to go that I think they could be fine in that regard. Since Patrick brought it up. Is there anyone from that group of young players? We've started calling them the Lost Boys. It's kind of led by Brendan Rodgers. He's sort of the symbolic one, right? Where there was this ton of potential. He was phenomenal as a minor leaguer. He really just hasn't been healthy or productive yet as a major leaguer. But just over 100 plate appearances. There's a lot of guys on this roster like that. Maybe not that wide a range of possibilities where it could be nothing, could maybe even still have some star potential there. But I think Ryan McMahon's another one of those guys. Could just not work out for him. Could be one of those star guys. Other guys who can maybe be more like role players. I don't know how much you got into the Josh Fuentes mania last year, but is there any of these young guys you're buying stock in that you're particularly going, they're not going to win a lot of games, but I'm really going to enjoy watching that guy?
Am I allowed to say Zach Veen, or is that not allowed?
Can we try to pick someone on the major league roster? No, that's fine.
Someone with facial hair. How about that? Or the capacity to grow facial hair.
Someone who can drink a Breck brew. Someone old enough to have a Breckenridge beer.
Yeah, I mean, Ramel Tapia to me is an interesting guy. I think he's technically on the older end of that scale. But he's an interesting player. I mean, he's sort of evolved. He had the breakout year last year, and he's going to be asked, I think, to do a lot this year, switching to center field most likely is going to be a tough transition for him, and that might wear him down. It'll be interesting to see where he slots in this lineup too. Like when you start to run down how this lineup looks, Ramel Tapia is near one of the better hitters. He's one of the more proven hitters in this lineup for sure. So I mean, it's a tough spot to say. They might be counting on him for a lot, and besides Trevor and Charlie, Tapia might be the next guy. I sort of, I like Ryan McMahon a lot as a player. Brendan Rodgers is interesting as well, but I'm not sure that I'm counting on those guys for very much at all, especially for a sustained period. I think that's a tough sell. I mean, Josh Fuentes, who knows? He to me might be the biggest wild card on the roster. I mean, the numbers that he put up last year were they were legit. If he had been able to sustain those for a full 162, we'd be counting him as one of the next guys to come through for this team. But it was 60 games, so can you really bank on that? That's tough. That's a hard thing to do. So that's where I think the 2% playoff probability is coming in, is that I think that it is a really tough sell on any of these guys, and that's where we would like to see the projections that the crew at 20th and Blake have on these guys, to say that they're getting only the reports that are in that point, that 0.2% of playoff chance guy. Those are the reports they're reading, and so we're not seeing them. I did think Keith Law actually made a point too in his rankings for the Rockies to say that the Rockies are one of the teams that doesn't really share their data as much as other teams. So they're hard for prospect evaluators to get, real good eyes on, so that they're possibly underrated more than other people, and that they play in such extreme environments when they come up, playing in Albuquerque, playing in the Cal League, like stuff like that. It's hard to get a true read on some of these guys. And, you see that too with the numbers that these guys put up in some cases. And so you can get it, they can be seen as the next great thing. And the problem has been that all too often they haven't. That would be Brendan Rodgers to me. I mean, I don't ever think Ryan McMahon was quite that high as far as, highly touted of a guy as Brendan was. I mean, Brendan was in the top 100s and stuff like that. So I don't think it's fair to necessarily write him off yet, but you can't argue that it's been a struggle for him. So they have some guys that are interesting, but I think that to say that they have, guys that are going to hit more than 250 and are going to hit more than 20 home runs and, drive in more than, 60 runs or something, to say that they have more than a few of those guys of that group, I don't think that those would be safe bets, in my opinion.
No matter what you say after this, we'll probably have you back because you're a fan of Drew's guy, Raimel Tapia. So just that alone probably ensures a second appearance for Hunter somewhere along the way. And I think maybe the nickname, like you said, it could be the Lost Boys are who we have to give credit to that 0.2%. It's not 0, it's 0.2%. So Raimel 0.2%, it doesn't have a great ring to it, but it is something, and it's definitely some promise if Tapia can continue to build. He essentially has done that. Now he didn't deliver in his rookie year, or even in that second kind of rookie season as I would have hoped, but since then he's been better every year, and you'd have to think a guy at 27 years old is still improving his abilities. So he's going to get that opportunity to. I mean, pretty much every projection system has him at batting leadoff, and there's really no one else on this team that you could suggest would, do better. We'll kind of wait and see for the season, but Tapia's going to get that opportunity, and he very well could be a good reason for that 0.2%.
Yeah, I mean, with Tapia, there have been a lot of guys that have given that the Rockies tried last year hitting in that one spot. So to find that guy, I was a big proponent when the winter started that I really would have liked to see the Rockies, do something and sign George Springer. To me, George Springer was the epitome of everything that the Rockies should have been looking for. He was a leadoff hitter. He's playoff pedigree, great, in the community, all those things. Like, that's what you want from that guy. That's never going to be Ramel Tapia. I mean, not the stuff about him not being a great guy or anything. He's a good guy, but George Springer, the player, is that guy, and that's not going to be Ramel Tapia. I mean, I remember going to one of my first spring trainings, and my host, Mike Farron, told me, like, we have to go watch this Ramel Tapia because he was sort of this interesting prospect. I don't know if you guys remember, but his deal was in an 0-2 count, he would crouch all the way down to try to get on base. That was his deal. And and it was exactly, it was known, and like he wasn't really known for anything else, but everybody wanted to sort of go see Tapia to be that. And he's evolved from there. And he's no longer just this sort of fluky guy that you want to go see because he crouches down and, when he's got 2 strikes on him, but he's probably a 4th outfielder on even, average to good team. I don't know that he's a starting out. He wouldn't start for most good teams, I would say. Just trying to think about the rest of the league. Like, if you put him in the Dodgers outfield, he's behind, a few guys. So, like,
they couldn't afford Ryan Tapia. Let's be honest. The Dodgers now can't afford. Well, can't
really break the bank at this point.
But yeah, I mean, maybe he hits on that 0.2%. I mean, that could be. So,
Ramel Tapia is going to win a batting title. I'm telling you, he's going to win a batting title in Major League Baseball. I don't know. I know they don't mean what they used to, but yeah.
I don't think you should go to DraftKings with that. I'm just going to put that out there.
Oh, that's got to be huge odds. The plus on that's got to
true,
be enormous.
Payout.
I got to barely put in any money.
The Rockies have had a batting champion in 29 of 28 seasons in the National League.
I think that's right.
A lock. So someone's going to pay you out pretty nicely.
True. Yeah. Contact, baby. Making contact.
I don't think the next one is Tapia, but
who from that group do you think could win a batting title? Is it Brendan Rodgers? Obviously, we haven't seen it yet, but you like his ability to maybe put the ball in play a little bit better. Tapia, did have the highest batting average last year in the Rockies, so I think for now that might put him as the favorite, at least to lead the team. We'll see if he can win the league. But who are you betting to maybe win a batting title on this current roster of guys? If you had to, let's put Trevor Story to the side for right now in that conversation.
Oh, I don't know that I would take anybody. I mean, Tapia is somewhere near the top of that list. Yeah, Tapia is.
I'm saying
would be in the top 5 of this, but I mean, okay. I don't know that I would take any of them. I might choose to save my money.
We got someone, Jonathan Daza. We got a little Sam Hilliard. All right, yeah, these guys are gonna get an opportunity. And again, we know they need to, particularly Hilliard needs to cut down on the strikeouts. So, he's got a way to go to do that. But certainly, could be a guy that leads the league in slugging if things go right. But a lot needs to happen for these Lost Boys for sure. Was there anything else from the health and safety protocols, Hunter, that you saw that was an interesting wrinkle? Were you glad to see that the 7-inning doubleheaders are back? The California extra inning rule with the runner on second base, just kind of necessary. Just it is what it is.
The most interesting thing that I saw, which isn't even necessarily it's not a rule even for the season, but most interesting thing that I saw is spring training for the beginning part, they're going to allow teams to play either 5 or 7 or some combination of those, or to call off an inning after 20 pitches. They are changing all sorts of stuff in spring training. So just if you go to a game, look alive for the rules for that game. You you may not know them unless, I don't know, you check Twitter, because I'm sure they'll have to be known before the game. But stuff like that to me is interesting. I think that It's awesome that they're going to let guys go and eat outdoors. Just in like hearing some of the stories and the ways that, you know, guys were forced to stay in the hotel, and the, you know, the policing of that, like that had to be tough. And, you know, the restrictions that I think the part that I don't think we even think about is just the baseball player is one thing, but they have a family too. And so the wife and the kids, and, you know, maybe they have a nanny that takes care of the kids. All those people are having restrictions basically put on them for what they can do to keep the baseball player safe, and to not do things, and to not, you know, risk getting, you know, COVID. And so like that's a tough thing. And for those guys, like, to say that they should have done like a bubble environment, or that they should do a bubble environment for 162 games is just a crazy thing to me. And so I have a lot of respect for those guys and the way that they were able to pull it off. And I think if you look at, you know, some of the other sports, I mean, hockey has blown the numbers out of the water. There were tons and tons of infections in football. Now, they never missed a game, which, you know, if you watched the Broncos game,
I was gonna say Broncos fans know all about that.
Broncos Saints was should have been that game, but they never did, and they had all these infections. And to think that while baseball last year did have, you know, a number of infections, they really had 2 outbreaks, and so that is impressive. And the way that they have sort of shifted this year to, you know, as we learn more and more about the way that the virus spreads and stuff like that, they're, you know, it's a 10-day lockdown the teams are going to go on. And hopefully, you know, you have leaders in the room, and, you know, guys that get on everybody on these teams to make sure that they don't pass that. I mean, you know, just thinking about like the Justin Turner situation last year with Doc, it's crazy. And to think about, you know, in the Rockies clubhouse, Bud Black's there, and I mean, he's got the age factor, so you have to, and a number of coaches do too for the Rockies. So, you know, if you bring something into the clubhouse, it can spread very quickly. And so those are the things that, you know, it's tough. And so I'm very appreciative of what everybody was going to do, and I don't think that it should be lost, the commitments and the sacrifices that the families as well as the players made. So.
Yeah, I think, in fact, actually, since you were talking about, you know, the people being able to go out to eat and that being a good situation, I think that's a good time for me to mention our friends at Hassel Cattle Company. If you are staying in to eat, get a little Wagyu beef from Hassel Cattle Company. My open challenge remains open. A few people have told me they've gotten some steaks, gotten some of that bacon, maybe the ground chuck or the ground beef. Still 5-star reviews across the board. I'm still waiting for one person to tell me that this hasn't been incredibly tasty beef. And the best things about it are that it's, you know, hormone free. They have free range beef out there. They're treating the cattle well. That treats the environment well, treats your body well, and it treats your wallet well. They're not charging you ridiculous prices for this stuff. In fact, when you go and check for the pretty regular promos, you end up spending less than you would at the grocery store. So go to Hassel Cattle Company. That's HASSELL, cattlecompany.com. Promo code DNVR10. You'll save 10% off your order and $200, which again, I highly recommend, because not only do you get with that order, you just get a whole bunch of really good beef, and you don't have to go beef for quite a while. So, the challenge open, getting nothing but 5-star reviews. Try it. Tell me it's not absolutely delicious and worth every penny.
Bacon covered meatballs.
And
make it happen, people. Let's see those pics.
I'm saying that's right. Send us on Twitter. You got to hit us up. So there was one thing I wanted to ask you about, Hunter, before we let you out of here, as somebody who, you know, I sometimes walk over this line too, but I spend much more time of it on the other side of it, a Rockies person among Rockies people, talking to people who mostly know the Rockies. And then every once in a while, especially like, you know, in certain situations, I end up where, Now, I'm the representative of the Rockies. When you live in that world a lot more often, where you're among all the other baseball people, when there's the Rockies take, they you. They need to know what, and there's been this whole Hall of Fame thing going on. We've seen what happened. Larry Walker finally getting in. Todd Helton with this huge surge this year. What have you seen from these people who are great baseball people, but not necessarily the most educated Rockies people, and the way that their attitudes and opinions and the conversations they've had with you about these two players have evolved over this last, half to full decade?
Yeah, I would first start by saying that I'm not sure that the baseball writers are wrong. I think Todd Helton is close to the line of a Hall of Fame player. He's not a surefire guy to me. So I think that where he is sort of fair. The evaluation of Coors Field and the way that it impacts players, I think, has sort of only it's becoming more known. It definitely, even within the last 5 years, the major impact that it has, and seeing even within the since the Nolan Arenado trade and the way that it has been written about, and the way that people talk about Nolan's drop in batting average on the road versus at home, starts to speak to some of the understanding. And I give baseball writers a lot of credit. Most of them are very well versed in that kind of stuff. The Hall of Fame crowd is not necessarily all current baseball writers that are voting. So whether they all know that kind of stuff, that's a fair criticism. But I would say that the ones that are doing baseball every day know the way that the Coors impacts guys, and to say that it is a hitter's park, while it is, there are more friendly hitter environments in baseball. I don't think anybody would dispute that at this point. Like the way that the Coors plays with, the Bridge barrier and anything like that, like it's become a little bit of a more fair park. But the other part is just how hard it then becomes when you go on the road to adjust. And the impact that it has on your batting average is more than just it's harder to hit outside of Coors Field. That's not it. It's the breaks that the balls take more or less of when you go between the two of them. It's that kind of an adjustment. And there's no way to even really prepare for that until you get into a game and you're going against pitchers that are the best in the world. And you're seeing guys that are throwing 100 miles an hour and that have huge breaking balls and everything like that. Like that part, I think, has sort of become more known and more accepted. And so, Todd's going to continue to go up, and whether he gets in, I don't know. I would tend to say he maybe ends up on the wrong side of getting 75%. I just think will there be enough people that continue to come over to the side of Todd Helton while the numbers of, voters go down basically every year as they sort of kick out guys that aren't covering the sport as much or that may not have that knowledge. That should be a helpful thing for Todd. But I also then think that the number of pluses that he gets, the number of votes he picks up is probably likely to go down, because those minds may be harder to change because of who they are and who the voter base is in general. I think that, as far as trying to understand the Rockies, a lot of it is, if you were going to make the case for trading for Nolan Arenado at a lower price, you can easily say he's going to come to St. Louis and hit worse here. Like, we're not getting as good of a player. There are people that probably would fall for that argument. Some of them might, be in the front office and owning the Rockies. Who knows? But that kind of a thing, as far as the baseball world and the impact of Coors and the hitting is, the old adage about how great it is to hit at Coors Field. While it is, it's also harder when you go on the road to maintain those things. And so therefore, there's a lot of give and take in that.
I think there might be even a correlation between what Nolan does in St. Louis this year and helping Helton's cause. I think that'll, further bring it to, the forefront. This idea that, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're gonna lose a couple points on your batting average on balls in play. Your BABIP's going to go down because the outfield's not as large in St. Louis and in the other NL Central, ballparks. But look at what he does on the road. Oh wow, he took a step up, and I think that's going to help the conversation probably a lot more than LeMahieu, because that wasn't the conversation with LeMahieu quite as much. It was just, whoa, he's better than we thought, and he's hitting a lot more home runs. He magically has more power, and Drew did a good job, kind of looking into that and saying, well, a lot of that has to do with hitting the opposite way and going to the short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. So again, although we've seen guys be successful outside of Coors, Matt Holliday, another Cardinals guy who was able to do it, it hasn't fully taken flight. It hasn't totally been grasped on by the national media, and so Nolan can actually help that, I think, in a lot of ways, and maybe garner a few extra voters in Helton's corner if things go well for him.
I think that's a fair point too. I mean, if you just try to think of examples, I think you're sort of hard pressed to find a guy other than DJ maybe, who's a freak on his own, who got better or even tended to be about the same of a hitter after he left the Rockies. I'm trying to think of guys that
I've got a long list of them.
None of them superstars, but still guys that, I mean, Holliday was one, I think.
Holiday was the main one who put up
sure.
better OPS plus, WRC plus numbers, all that stuff post Rockies. Walker was obviously older, but still his OPS plus, WRC plus numbers are that. Dexter Fowler's one of the major ones where his numbers all go up. Juan Pierre back in the day, I'm reaching back, but still his numbers all go up.
He actually had a higher slugging percentage.
My list.
Yeah, actually, it was somewhat close. He had almost the same, believe it or not, in Miami as Colorado. It's a fun one.
Yeah. And then there's a pretty solid list of guys who were better hitters before they came to Colorado, and then they came here and were bad. But that's I think kind of a different thing, right? That's a different thing.
And the assumption.
Right.
Free agents? So we're just talking about free agents, huh?
But I mean, guys who have really good resumes as hitters and should have come here and hit, and for no particular reason other than, and I think a lot of it has to do with Hunter's talking about here, whether we want to call it the hangover effect, or we started trying to call it the margin of error there for a little while, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's tough for a new guy to adjust to, and it's just like, wait, all of a sudden I can't hit on the road. What's going on here? So, yeah, I think you're both right though in that, and maybe you're winning me over here because I've been so jaded about this. I'm like, no, Nolan will be fantastic, and the narrative will be the same thing, which is that he's better now, that the Cardinals brain trust, because they're such a better run organization. They unlocked an unhidden potential in Nolan Arenado, and now he's finally the elite player he could have been all along, but the Rockies were holding him back. And I hope you're both right that some people stop and go, oh, also maybe the fact that he just is in a much more consistent environment is allowing him to do these things. So Hunter, I hope you're right about that. You're winning me over. You're making me feel much better about that narrative because it's bothersome.
Yeah, I mean, I do think you can't argue with Nolan had a bad year last year. He had an injury. I mean, right. I think it's as simple as that for last year. But if you go back the years before, he is an elite player. So, I mean, to think that the Cardinals are going to be able to get more than that out of him would be, if they do, I mean, they probably deserve some amount of credit for it because he was a great player. And yeah, like you said, when Daniel Murphy came to the Rockies, dude could hit. Like, so what happened? I mean, any of that stuff is sort of a question mark as to, was it age, was it just straight decline, or was it part of that, decline factor of going from Coors to somewhere else to try and hit? It's more difficult. Same thing even, could be said, even a guy like Ian Desmond. I mean, he wasn't at the level of Daniel Murphy, but the guy had number of productive years. Now he then got older also, but he ran into the same thing. So there has to be some evaluation of why that happened. I mean, but then you have a guy like DJ who comes here and all of a sudden explodes and has continued to explode. So, where does it come, where does it come from? It's a combination of things. I don't think you can ever say really it was one thing or the other, or that, if circumstances hadn't been different, it would have been the same. So
DJ LeMay, he was an exploder. What can we say? Dude explodes. Dude explodes.
DJ was the one that blew my mind the most, though. When we dove into those stats, I was like, he's the exact same hitter in every way. His barrel percentage, his exit velocity, the spread charts. I really looked, Hunter, for like, you know what the difference is? Right field is 20 feet closer, and there's a
lot lower too.
There.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah,
that is it. And I get that all those home runs count, but it's like, man, I think we're wrapping up here, but this has been something I've talked about a little bit in the offseason. The Rockies have to make the outfield smaller. Like, we talk about all these, people want revolutionary change. They're like, fire the GM and sell the team. And I'm like, okay, I'm for all of it at this point. But I think, like, really make the outfield smaller. Can we start there? Can we stop making these guys who already play at altitude and have to deal with the hangover also have to patrol the biggest outfield in the history of ever? And just like, I think it's second actually in baseball, but it's ridiculous. And so I don't know where you stand on that, but I'm ready for a remodel down there at 20th and Blake.
I mean, it is interesting that there's no denying that outfield is huge, and the type of players that it takes. I mean, I think you could argue that it has been one of the reasons that Charlie has declined, because he's been forced to play it.
He would. So I bet if he was sitting here right now, he would tell you that.
Yeah, it's a tough place to have to play every day, or 82, 81 days. So, like, that part is tough, and so you sort of have to expect that. And again, that's sort of where depth is one of those things, and having a guy like who can just straight up play the outfield, and where they're missing a center fielder this year, like a guy like JBJ or somebody that can just go and get it, is an important piece. And he's not going to hit. If he hits better than 240, but he's playing a great center field, it helps both of the other outfielders, and B, the value is more than just the batting average at that point, especially in this outfield. And we had Ian Happ on the other day, and he was talking about how outs above average and some of the defensive metrics don't adjust for whether you play a guy right, like whether you're positioned correctly. And so you might have a routine catch because you were playing him more correctly, whereas you're not going to get a 5-star catch because you didn't have to fly to the other side of the field because you hadn't played right. And so, like, part of that is for this outfield and trying to figure out what that right mix is. And it's helpful to have a guy in center who can do that kind of a thing, and then you're not asking as much for him with when he's at the dish. And so that's where Charlie would have been in a tough spot for all those years, where he's having to do all of that on defense and then still come up and hit 300 and do all that stuff. You can see why a guy would decline doing that.
Yep, we've seen it. we watched it. Have a front row seat for that, and I don't think he's the only one. So, well, man, there are many other things I'd love to get your insights on. We'll have to have you back on it. This has been a lot of fun, man.
Appreciate it.
So, why don't you plug literally anything and everything you want? Take a couple of minutes before we sign off here and let the people know your stuff.
Well, you should listen to Power Alley on MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM, Sirius 209, XM 89. That's all I have. I would just say the one thing, if I had to give one piece of advice to the Rockies, what I think that they should do is they should go outside of the organization to hire a team president, somebody that is in baseball, that knows baseball, that can act as sort of a bridge between ownership and Jeff, and filter some of those things, and hopefully try to get more than what has been going on, or do more. The Rockies are a team that doesn't fire people, so a lot of they haven't fired anybody since Clint Hurdle. That's a true fact. So like having an outside idea and having an outside voice and having somebody that hasn't been in the organization would be something that I think would be productive for the team, and bringing some new people in, some people that have experience in baseball, would be invaluable in just how much it could impact. And it should be something that both Jeff and the ownership can learn from. Like, there are a number of guys who have been around baseball, a Dan Duquette type who, has done everything, started with the Expos, has rebuilt teams, has had playoff teams, guys like that could bring expertise and knowledge to this organization that is not something that currently exists in this organization.
All right, Jim Duquette, we're ready. I know you got his number. We're going to make it happen. We'll have our people call your people, and maybe we'll finally get a team president. I think that's definitely at the top of their to-do list.
I need you taking Jim away from me. I said his cousin Dan, but
oh, that's true. Well, thank you so much, Hunter. We appreciate you joining us for this. We'll definitely have to have you back. We seem to be lockstep with a lot of things, and like and rhyme Tapia is a big one for us here on the DNVR Rockies podcast. Recognizing the need for a team president, obviously incredibly valuable. So you are right there with us. So we do greatly appreciate you coming on at Hunter_Reiser. I am at Patrick D. Lyons, our guy at Drew Creasman. Follow us at DNVR_Rockies. We appreciate you listening and support all of our sponsors because they support us. So we greatly appreciate that. Of course, I'm going to stay Patrick Lyons. He's going to stay Hunter. Drew, he's somewhere out there in the ether. He's going to stay who he is. And until then, of course, we will see you at the ballpark.